Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Faith Focus Weekly Discipleship Podcast. My name is Kevin Rognes, and I'm the Discipleship Director here at Faith Covenant Church, and I'm very thankful that you're making the time to watch this or listen to this, depending on what platform you're on. And whichever platform you are on, make sure that you subscribe to get every single episode when they come out, which is always on Wednesdays. So, lots of great stuff going on in the podcast. In a few weeks, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things as we kind of launch into our fall ministries. But today, I'm joined by Mackenzie Madsen. She is one of our members here at Faith Covenant, and you've been here for a while.
Yeah, I'll be 30 next week, and so it'll be.
You're young. You're so young.
It'll be 30 years on August 28th that I have attended Faith Covenant. So.
So that's like literally next week, almost. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know.
So yeah, you've been here since you were based. So your parents went here, and you've been born.
My grandparents still go here. My parents still go here, and then me and Mark and our family go here now too.
So tell us a little bit about growing up at Faith Covenant and just like how you came to faith, because her maiden name is Kegley. So if you know people in the Kegley family, that would make sense. Yeah. That's you.
So I grew up, I've attended faith my entire life. I grew up going to, Faith Kids, and then, we had things like Fam Jam. I remember that one. Club 56 was really cool. I remember when I was a fifth grader, it was Club 56.
This is well before my time here.
Yes. And then we had the Revolution, and it was like the Refuge, I think. Then it changed to Fusion.
I was here for Fusion
so many names and people. But yeah, I grew up going to Faith. Some of my closest friends growing up were from Faith. Some of my best friends still were my church friends. I wanted nothing more than to be here on Sundays and Wednesdays, even though half the time I was in my softball uniform. My husband knows me as the annoying softball girl. That's what he categorized me as in high school, because I was always in my softball uniform because I had come to and from.
And her husband, for those of you who don't know, is Mark Madsen. I almost said Mark Mackenzie. Mark Madsen. And he went here as a kid too, right?
His family started coming in third grade, I think. So we were in the same Sunday school class in third grade. So when people ask how we met,
that's so cute.
Technically, third grade.
So get your kids in Sunday school,
and they'll meet the love of their lives. So.
Correct. That's always how it works, right?
It is always how it works.
Never mind the kids I didn't marry from Sunday school, but
no. I ended up. When Mark and I got married, we started dating in high school, and then when we got married, we decided that we wanted to live in the area, we wanted to be close to our families, and so we just never left, and here we are.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you guys have been married how long?
We have been married 7 years.
Okay. And Mark Madsen, for those of you who don't know, is on the church council, and so he is part of the group that kind of oversees the leadership of the church, too. So he's been on the council now for...
since you left.
Yeah. So I was here at Faith Covenant for a while, and that's right, because I was on council, and then as I was leaving it, he was coming on.
Yes.
So it was probably 2018, 2019, something like that. I don't know. It's been a while.
5 years? 6? Yeah.
But and you both have been very active in a variety of different ways throughout. I remember we used to go to a small group at your apartment in Burnsville. Yep. So they've both been very active, and your lives look very different now from when I first met you because when I first met you, you were helping out with youth group, right?
Yep. Because
you were done. Were you done with college yet?
Yeah, I was done with college. Yep.
Okay.
That was my first year teaching.
Okay, so you were a teacher. You were working with the youth group students here at Faith. At the time, you weren't yet married to Mark.
No.
But now tell us, where are you at with life right now?
So...
You're still teaching.
Yes, I'm still teaching.
That's the same.
So I teach at Prior Lake High School. And then I have my 4 kids. So I have Bella, Jackson, Zach, and Lainey are my 4 kiddos. We did have 3 kids previously, though. And so they were our foster children. And then we had them for a year and a half. And now we have... these 4. So life looks a little different than it did quite a few years ago. So essentially we gained 4 kids in 10 months is what I like to say. So
that's a very 0 to 100 parenting approach.
Yes. Most people don't do it, but go big or go home.
Yeah. And what are the kids' ages again?
So 11, 8, 5, and 6 months.
Baby.
Yeah.
She's super cute.
Yes, she's precious.
So for those of you who haven't caught on, Mark and Mackenzie decided to do foster parenting, and they had 3 girls for a year and a half. You said
2 girls and a boy.
Oh, 2 girls and a boy for a year and a half, and then they went back to their parents or went elsewhere.
Yep, they reunified with their mother.
And then after that, you got another 3 kids that you were fostering that you're now in the process of adopting, and these are the 3 older ones.
Yep.
And then you just had one biologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot.
Yeah.
Adopting 3 kids and having one within a year.
Yeah. It just seemed like a great idea.
So how did this kind of come about? Like, how did you and Mark decide that you wanted to do the foster to adopt route?
Yeah. So essentially, well, since going into this, I've learned foster to adopt is like a no-no phrase.
Gotcha. That's good to know.
Yes. Because you shouldn't ever foster with the intent of adopting. It should be always the idea of reunification. So you could adopt through foster care, but that's like just a little slight word change.
So foster care, the intention is always that these kids will be reunited at some point with their parents.
Yep. If you're not fighting for that, then you probably shouldn't be in it to begin with.
Yeah.
Is what I've learned over time, because that's how I would have phrased it as well. And so Mark and I always planned on either fostering or adopting. We weren't really sure at some point in our lives. And then we decided a few years ago that, 3 years ago now, just things kept like popping up. We had a couple of different friends that were social workers. That would like talk about it. We had a good friend that had started like her own company that directly was working with it. And so they were having like an info night. Somebody came to church and spoke about something. And I was like, okay, I really feel called to just look and like learn a little bit. And so
it's always how it starts, isn't it?
Yes. So Mark and I went to like an info night, and we learned all these horrible statistics, right? About just children that aren't adopted through foster care or just live in foster care or have horrible foster families. And we were like, you know what? Right now, I think we can do this. And so went to after the info training, we kind of left and we went out to eat. And I vividly remember sitting at Red Robin and Mark's like, so we're going to do this, right? Like this is what we're doing. And I was like,
I can just picture him saying that.
And I was like, yeah, I think we gotta. I think we gotta do something.
Now that you know this, you can't not do anything about it.
Yep. And so we kind of started our training. We are licensed through Bethany Christian Services. We started our training there because we really wanted God at the center of that training as well. There are a lot of different ways to become a licensed foster parent, but we wanted a Christian organization.
And you mean licensed like through the state?
Yes. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Through the state or county, or other like private owned companies or organizations. And so we went through all the training, and then we had 3 placed with us. And so we had those 3 for a year and a half. And
how old were they?
Ironically, the same ages as our current 3. So it's the same as our forever 3, I guess. And so they were at the time, 8, 4, and 2.
Okay.
So 8, 4, and 2.
And they were siblings.
Yep. All half siblings. And so they lived with us for a year and a half. And so that was a huge, huge learning curve. Obviously, I mean, just being a parent is hard on top of all the trauma and things that kids in foster care obviously come with. And so there was a little...
Because even if the foster family is a safe, good place, like with you and Mark, they're coming out of a situation that's likely
and unfortunately,
traumatic.
these 3 had been pulled from their biological mom, and then were in some really, really bad foster homes that definitely added to that significant trauma. And so we spent a lot of time learning how to do that. They were also Black. And so we were learning about transracial parenting as well, which is a huge, obviously as a middle-class white woman, I have not a clue of what it's like to be a person of color in America. And so that was a huge learning curve too, as we had them during COVID and George Floyd.
That's so much all at once.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yikes.
And so we spent a lot of time learning and relearning how to be an effective parent in a world where you really just can't. I mean, by God's grace, you can't even come close. So, or without God's grace.
Yeah, that's a lot. And so one of the things that interests me about adopting, because the 3 that you're fostering now and in the process to adopt, they're also siblings. And so part of what's really interesting with that, when I think of adoption, is that you're adopting kids that already have fully formed personalities. I mean, not that they won't change in the future, but like when you adopt a baby, you get to see that evolution kind of come up. When you adopt kids that are not babies, there's already a lot of development that's happened. You have to learn who they are really quickly. What's that been like?
Yeah. So, well, awkward at first. I feel like the older they are, like the more awkward it is to start, right?
Sure.
Like our 2-year-old, like we're like, oh, you're 2. Like, yeah, like you have the fun things, but like, okay, like Paw Patrol, but like that was like the extent kind of, right?
Sure.
Whereas getting to know a 10-year-old, Bella was 10 when she moved, like getting to know a 10-year-old and like trying to figure out like, okay, what are some things we have in common, right? Because not that you're the exact same as your parents by any means, but like you can kind of mold your kids into like having similar interests, slightly. I'm not going to say all the time, doesn't always work, right? But like I know I like love musicals because my mom does, right?
My siblings love baseball because my parents do.
Yes. Yep. Like it's
I'm the black sheep.
Yeah, I was gonna say and I play softball because of my dad. So like, there's a million things that like I know I do because of my parents. Whereas, like, okay, like for Bella specifically, I'm like, okay, what do you like that I also like that we can bond on, right? And she loves makeup, and like she's like, oh, do you have this? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So like, well, okay, that's
so
not.
You're trying to catch up on the YouTube tutorials,
right? Or like, I really like this, or I like this. And so it's hard trying to find like a common bond is hard. It's also really, really hard with just like, I mean, a variety of forms of attachment, but like physical touch is also a really hard thing, right? Especially with kids that have come from hard places. It's really hard to know like what is okay and what's not, and kind of letting them guide it. Whereas like our now 5-year-old Zach is very comfortable, like, oh yeah, we're going to hug, we're going to do whatever. And he's always been that way. And the younger they are, they're more comfortable with that too.
Right.
So finding ways to form physical attachment with an older child is really hard. So like even like doing hair, or like painting nails, not that clear. Don't look at my nails. They're not done, or they're atrocious. But weird. Things like that, like that are like ways to connect, or like sitting side by side watching something, or like all things that we had to heavy load at the beginning to form like the safe bonds that we wanted later on.
Right. So. Well, and also like, a 10-year-old versus a 2-year-old has a lot more to learn about being a kid with new parents. Like, because, your 10-year-old has more an idea of now an 11-year-old, but she has more of an idea of what a mom and dad should or could be than a 2-year-old does.
Yes. And that's been really, really hard too, is establishing like, this is what a family, I don't want to say supposed to be, right? But like, this is what the role of a mom is, and this is what the role of a dad is. And trying to unteach or unlearn some of the things that they have, like the preconceived notions that they do have of what a parent has done in the past. Or even just like responsibilities, right? I know like when I shared that I was pregnant with Lainey, there was like had some very large concerns about them having to do things. Because they had to in the past. And so trying to figure out like, nope, I will, like, Mark and I, Dad and I are in charge of Lainey. Like, you don't have to, if you want to help. Great, awesome. But like, you certainly don't have to. And I won't ever say like, you need to do X, Y, and Z because your job is to be 11. We talk a lot about like what your jobs are.
You get to be a kid. You get to do school.
Your job is to try your best. And play. And like learning how to play, that's been a big one that we've had to like practice. Okay, how can we play? Like, what do we do with toys and all this jazz?
Yeah. So and now that you're also parenting a wee infant,
yes.
How is that? I mean, because that's probably in some ways feels a little bit more natural because you're starting from the very beginning instead of jumping in partway through. So what's that experience been like to add that into this whole mix?
Yeah, it's been funny. We've kind of talked, like, I was very nervous before Lainey was born because I was like, okay, I've parented ages 2 to 10. Mm-hmm. And like, I know how to do 2 to 10. I have no idea how to do infant. And like, I'm not a huge baby person either. So like, I've never really like tried to care. And so learning how to do that has been very different. And like, we've loved being able to just like from the very beginning know, like,
this is exactly what her history is.
This is it. We know everything.
Yeah.
And so that's been really wonderful. It's so much easier. It is so much easier to parent a child that is yours biologically. And that's not to say that like we love the other 3 any less, because we love them all the same.
But it presents a different set of challenges.
It's just 100% a different challenge, right?
Yep.
And so there just hasn't ever been, we haven't ever had to play the balancing act, I guess.
Yeah.
And so the difference, I would say, or like the hard part is now like, okay, like the way we do things with one child isn't the same way that we're going to do something with like X, Y, and Z. We talk a lot about how we all have different challenges. Mm-hmm. And so like your challenge, child A, is this. That's why we do it this way. Mm-hmm. Whereas you, like this other child has different things. That's why we do it this way. Like we don't parent any of the 4 the same, which is a really, really hard concept.
Yes.
For the others to understand, right? Yeah. So-and-so gets to do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, that's like, this is a hard thing for them. And so we're doing it this way.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing too that's really interesting is the level of intentionality that you have to have in conversation with your kids, in part because they're adopted, but also just because, you know, each kid's different. And I think sometimes parents are hesitant to have those kinds of conversations with their kids of like, this is why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Like I know my parents, they were great parents, but they never really sat me down a whole lot and said, this is why this is happening this way. And and do you think you're doing that because that's kind of maybe how you're wired, or is it because you're adopting and so you feel like you have to be intentional?
I would say 100% that way. Same way, like my parent, I mean, both Mark and I like can attest, like our parents were, this is it, right? Yeah. It's my way or the highway, right? Like you listen because you listen.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really, really hard adjustment as parents, like to go with, okay, like you aren't going to listen just because that's how you were raised, right? Because they weren't.
Right.
And so building kind of that trust and like explanation, like I know that if I need to give a direction and an explanation, I can get there. And especially with our older, it's like I need to explain it. If I don't explain it, then it like the world is ending. And so I have found that the intentionality of having a conversation and going through and explaining even just like transitions and things like that, right? Like we are going to do this today. And this is why we're going to do this. And like things go so much more smoothly and way fewer battles than whereas if I were to say, all right, because
right.
Just because does not work.
Yeah, totally understandable. And so on this podcast, we often talk a lot about discipleship, and discipling younger generations is a huge part of what church is designed to help families do. And kind of coming back to the conversation of like having to kind of learn where each kid is at, what's that like with discipling your 3 older kids? I mean, obviously right now you're just kind of keeping your youngest alive and just like feeding her and bathing her and putting her to sleep. She's a little too young, obviously, to know much. But then in terms of discipling the older kids, you've had to kind of figure out where they are spiritually, and what's that whole journey been like?
Yeah, so that's been really, really hard. I would say.
And I don't want us, and I just want to be clear too, like I don't want us to intrude on the privacy of the kids either.
Right.
So that's why it's hard.
It's hard to. I would say for all 6 kiddos that we've taken into our home, They each have had their own experiences with what they think church is, what they think Jesus is, and they haven't been correct. And so trying to kind of navigate where you're at, where we would love you to be, and then just kind of being able to sit in the middle.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let's be honest, at first, it was, if we do well at church, we can go out to eat. So if we go to church without complaining, then we can go get canes, was our mantra on Sundays.
Hey, that works.
Yep. I'm not above bribery. And so
I don't think any parent
no,
really is.
I think
at some point every parent bribes
yeah.
in some fashion. With me, it was probably books and library visits.
Right. That's the way it's going to work. And so, and then we are always intentional with our conversations. And so when we pray as a family, like before meals and before bed, and it's oftentimes like, can I pray for you? And if not, then I'll just pray later then for you. And so it's just we're constantly reminding them that it's just a part of us and it's a part of our life. And sometimes they're way interested in it. We have lots of good conversations. And sometimes it's, why are we talking about Jesus again? And everywhere in between. And I think that's a battle for a lot of parents. But knowing, kind of trying to piece together what they've experienced before, where things are wrong, without wrecking, I guess,
where things are wrong in terms of their understanding.
Yes,
okay.
Like their theology is way off.
Because they're kids,
yes.
And because they didn't necessarily have great examples of what church is.
We celebrate Christmas because Jesus died. And I was like, no. No, okay, let's go back.
Later, yes. But.
We've used our children's Bible a lot to show the pictures, and we've watched videos to kind of understand, no, this is where we're supposed to be. But just kind of trying to piece together things without wrecking their image or relationship of past caregivers has been hard.
Interesting.
Without saying ooh, no, that wasn't
that person
right.
Was wrong.
Ugh. Yes. Yep, they can have their own thoughts and opinions, but this is what we believe, or this is what we know to be true, and kind of navigating it that way without pressuring, especially our big kids.
Yeah. And that'll be really different with Lainey too, because again, there's no guesswork of what does she know spiritually. Yep. You already know, because she's been with you now this whole time. So whenever I think about you guys, these are the questions that I'm just like, how do you process this and navigate this? And then two, I'm sure there's a lot of dynamics with your peers, because like you said, you and Mark have been married for 7 years, and you have an 11-year-old, and so you're probably showing up to events with your 11-year-old, and most of the parents of 11-year-olds are a lot older than you.
Yeah, it's actually funny. So Bella had a sleepover the other day with one of her good friends, and I think she might be a product of a second marriage or something.
Sure.
But her dad is 60 years old.
Wow.
And I was like, so when I picked her up, I was like, hey, and he was her half brother is 31. So her half brother is older than me, and I'm like, we're not the same.
No.
Which that's another extreme, but yeah, it's funny going to events and functions, school things, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're not.
Most people probably aren't guessing that you're the parent of an 11-year-old.
No, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about how families. We talk about a lot of how families look different, but yeah. Bella's always like, "You're so young," and I'm like,
"You are. You're not even 30."
Well, not compared to what I want to be.
Years ago, she trained for a marathon, or started to anyway. If you thought it was hard then, try it again now.
I know, I will never do that again. That was a dumb
Never
idea.
say never. Those things happen.
No, I will never do it again.
Your husband did.
Yes.
Yes, Mark.
He didn't train.
He kind of did.
He trained as much as I did. He just was able to run the marathon.
Right.
I just stopped.
Yeah.
I ran half of it. Let's clarify. I ran a couple of half marathons that summer.
Yeah.
Didn't do nothing.
No, you did a lot more than a lot of people ever try.
Yeah.
So, yeah. One of the things, too, that I've heard a little bit about in your story is that, I'm going to rephrase that, rephrase. What have been some of the challenges of fostering fostering children or the adoption process in terms of like coming into the church as like, hi, we're a foster family now. Now we've gone from like no kids to 3 kids.
I would say, a couple of things. I think it's really, really hard. It's hard to parent kids from hard places when you're the only one. And so, I mean, you kind of I talked about how, right? We talked about how like being a younger parent to an older child is hard or not hard, just different. But when they're not yours biologically, obviously there are other things that come along with it. And being the only one dealing with that, I think is really, really hard.
You mean the only one in a congregation or in a
congregation or in a group of people or whatever else? I mean, like I can talk, like my best friend Brooke and I can talk about parenting all we want, but like your 1-year-old isn't going to have the same like things that I'm dealing with, right? Yep. So as much as, and like people can talk and whatever else all they want, but until you're like really with people, whether like adopted from birth or adopted later on through foster care or whatever else, like until you're talking to people that have experienced it, they're just not going to get it.
Right.
And so like, I mean, I even know like talking to my in-laws, we went up north last week, and they were like, I see it. I see what you are doing every single minute of every day. And I'm like, thank you. That's all. That's kind of like what I need, right? I need to be like validated. But I think that's one of the things that like is hard with being a part of a congregation or a group of friends or whatever, is just kind of like nobody else fully understanding, because parenting is different. Parenting kids with special needs, very hard.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with like all 3 facets at once, it can be really, really isolating. And so, and people say, right, oh, I'd love to babysit. But like, I probably won't call you up and say, hey, can you babysit all 4 of my kids? Right. Because nobody probably wants to.
Right.
And so it's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of talk without a lot of like follow through, especially at the beginning of our foster care journey. I felt like I had a lot of like, and I love everybody that helped us, just to clarify. But like, I felt like I had a lot of surface level support at the beginning. Okay. So like, we did this, or we did X, Y, and Z, and these are the cool things.
Here's a meal.
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. Love it. But I'd like need this and this and this, and like no one is doing that. Yeah. If that makes sense. So like even just Mark and I have established a pretty good routine of like how we can get self-care. And so trying to figure that out.
Which every parent should have deliberate, intentional routines of self-care.
100%. And I would say that's multiplied if you are fostering.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have been very deliberate with our time and being able to kind of go about things a certain way. And I think we've done a much better job with these 3, with our 4 forevers, than we did with our 3 that we fostered. And so, but yeah, I think just being kind of isolated, nobody really fully understanding, trying, but like kind of when it's convenient trying, I guess. Yeah. And then just, those 2 things, kind of like not having necessarily the support, but I don't know, I'm just rambling now. So
no, I get what you're saying, because you need people that are there with you in the nitty gritty.
Yes.
And not just at the surface, not at just the beginning, because parenting is an ongoing challenge for anyone. Yes. We need to be there for everyone at all times. And that's why church community is so important. Where is the adoption process currently? Because I know it's not finalized.
No.
With the elder
so
3,
we are,
but it's close.
Yes. So with the other 3 we had, they were reunified with their mother. So their parental rights were never terminated. Like we were truly fostering. Whereas these 3, before they had moved in, their parental rights had already been terminated. So we knew we were adopting them when they moved in with us. And so the process, I mean, like the whole start was way different looking. But we are literally just waiting for like the state to give like the little final check.
Yeah.
And give us a date. So just waiting on that.
Yeah, and you have no idea when that's...
No.
Because I know the last time I talked to you about this, it was in the same place, and that was months ago.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're just chilling.
Yeah. Just waiting. Yep. And that's hard too, I'm sure. But also in the midst of this, you moved.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot in the last year, 10 months, whatever.
Yeah, everybody, yeah. So...
Took in 3 new kids, had a kid, moved into another house.
Yeah, the year 2022 was a good year.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to do in 2023.
Run a marathon?
No, I never can. Maybe something fun. Go on a trip.
Go on a trip. That sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a couple of questions to kind of just wrap this up. What are the things, and you can answer this however, answer one or both. In what ways have you seen God present in this journey, or what have you most learned in this whole journey? I'm sure there's a lot.
Yes.
A lot of patience, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I'm not a patient person at all. I would say God has opened my eyes, and been, I would say both and, right? Been there and opened my eyes to so many more of like the injustices of the world. Whereas that like maybe I was blind to before. And I think it has given me a ton more empathy for kids from hard places, for parents from hard places, and just all people in general. I don't think that was there before. And so that has helped a ton with my professional life, with my parenting, and just, living life with people. I think I have way more empathy than I did before, and that's truly God's grace, and just kind of understanding that God has a plan for, and trust that God has a plan for what we are doing. I truly the other 3 reunifying with their mother was the best and hardest thing in the world. And so...
Because how long were they? They were with you a year and a half. Yeah, so you developed really close relationships with them.
And it was truly the best thing for them and for us. But it was extremely hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to invest in something that you know is going away.
Yeah.
And so trying to we wouldn't have these 3 then. And so there's beauty that comes from train crashes, I don't know, and disasters. And so learning to trust in that and being able to sit with that and know that it is the right thing has been something that has helped me since.
Yeah.
And Mark too.
Are you allowed to have any contact with the first 3? Or
yeah, okay. It's kind of been semi in mom's court. So the ball's been in mom's court for an extent of time. But yeah, we have contacted quite a bit. We went no contact for a while. And then things like this spring, all of a sudden we were talking all the time. And now things have kind of gone away again. I've been very, very conscious about how it makes my forever 3 feel.
Right.
Because I don't ever want them to feel replaced or like they are replacing,
right. Or like a second tier.
Yeah. And so
we weren't the first choice.
Yeah, and I never ever want them to feel that way. And so just a very conscious effort of this is a time where we're going to talk where I am by myself, and things like that. So we know that they're safe and they are healthy and they are loved, and that is really all we wanted for them. And so it's been really, really awesome and wonderful to be able to cheer on their mom.
Yeah. And two, that's one of those things, there's so many circumstances, I think, in discipling anyone where we just have to surrender the outcome because we don't get to know what happens in a person's life.
Yep.
So often in Christian life, we plant seeds and then we're not there to see the harvest. And we never know when that happens or if that happens or how it happens. It's not up to us to do the harvesting. And that's got to be infinitely more hard in a case like this where they were your kids for a year and a half.
Yes.
And you've planted these seeds and now you're just go forth. This is in God's hands now.
Yes.
that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I would say fostering is one of the most rewarding and hardest things that you can do in the world. But it doesn't take special people. It just takes a random person, an average human.
Yeah.
This foster mom that I like really want to be when I grow up on Instagram. I'm obsessed with her. But she always says that she's a subpar mom running on grace. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual yummy. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, and kind of coming back to the fostering thing, like who can foster?
Literally anyone. So it depends, obviously. Like, I mean, you can go through different agencies and whatever else. But you just need to be someone that's open and have a place for a child. So you can be like pretty specific too, which is kind of cool. Like if you only want to foster teens, or if you only want to foster infants, or anywhere in between. There's a huge need for siblings because they're obviously harder to place, and there's a huge need for kids older than 12.
Yeah.
I do know that for a fact. So anybody can foster, and it's incredible. And you can also do things like only do, oh my gosh, I'm thinking of the word, respite. So like they're only here for like weekends or emergency pullouts, or you can do long-term foster care. Like it's all over the place and what are open for you for options. But I would say if you're interested in fostering, I would love to talk to you about it. But there's also so many other ways that you can get involved just by knowing a foster family and helping out that way, whether it's with meals, babysitting. I know I saw this post that like in the foster care community on Instagram, like when like, which is like a weird little facet of life in the world.
There's all those kind of weird communities on Twitter and Instagram and stuff.
But I know there's a was when I was like, all I want for Christmas is, and it was like trauma-informed babysitter. And I was like, yes. I mean, honestly, yes, please.
Yeah.
And so, like, obviously, we have wonderful people in our lives that have taken the time to do the research and talk to me about it, and gone through those things. But I'm like, oh, like, if you can be involved in some way of helping and just, like, being with a family and, like, doing life with. So if you're not called to foster, you're called, everyone's called to foster or be involved in foster care in some way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, as Christians, we're called to be there for the widow and the orphan. You know, a foster child may not be an orphan fully,
right?
But in the moment, they kind of are because their parents are maybe not in a place where they're able to take care of them in the way they need to be cared for. And so, I mean, it's fostering is absolutely part of the biblical call for us to care for people. Yeah, 100%. I had another question that I just thought of, but then it just slipped my mind. Oh, not a question, but just kind of to attest to the idea that anybody can foster. I have a friend of mine who lives in Kansas City. She is, I think, a couple years younger than me, so I think she's probably in between our age. And she is fostering as a single person. Like, she's not married. She's just like, I haven't gotten married and I want to be involved in kids' lives, but I'm not at a place where I can be a permanent parent, but I can foster. And so now I know she had a foster infant for a few weeks or a couple months, and then it went back to the parent, and then suddenly just a few days ago the baby came back to her. Okay. And so, I mean, it can be anyone.
Yes. Yeah. Single, married. You don't have to own a home.
Because this wasn't on your radar at all before you and Mark got married, right? From what I...
No, we never experienced anybody that had done so. Yeah. And so we just thought this is something that we want to do, and we're just gonna
do it.
Go for it.
I mean, to me that sounds like when Jesus calls disciples and says, "Put your nets down and come do this." That's what I'm hearing in you and Mark's story. Jesus kind of said, "Hey, come do this," and you just said, "Okay, we're putting our nets down." Yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Mark and Mackenzie are two people that I am really grateful that we have in our congregation, and I hope you get the chance to meet them. They have a bunch of children, as we've talked about, so they usually, if you're in our building physically here, they're usually sitting in the far right section. If you're looking at the stage, they're usually towards the front and the far right.
Yes.
Because most people in churches are creatures of habit and sit in the same place
Yes.
every week. So that's where they are. You can find them there oftentimes. Anything else you want to kind of conclude with to wrap up the conversation?
No, I don't think so. I think God has just played an instrumental part in Mark and I's relationship, and in the lives of our kids. And so we'd be more than happy to accept your prayers as we go about
What are your biggest prayer needs?
The start of the school year.
Yep.
And just kind of transitioning back to different routines and things like that. I'm going back to work after 6 months of being off because I didn't go back after having Lainey in February. And so
So it's not just the kids going back to school, it's
No,
mommy
yeah,
too.
oh yeah, mom's going back to school. And so just transitioning back to that, I think for bio parents, wherever they are, that they are cared for and loved and know that. And just kind of, I would guess just pray for all of the kids everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I can only help so many.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Well, thank you, Mackenzie, for joining us. Thank you, Mark, for all that you do for this congregation and for your children. And thank you, viewers and listeners. Thank you for watching. And I hope that this story was edifying. I know I learned a lot, and I'm really encouraged by hearing how God is working in your lives. So
thank you.
thanks for being here, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Bye.